Right now, I'm not planting so much eelgrass. I'm waiting to see how all of the transplants are doing that I've put in with other people over the years. And so what we're doing is just mapping it, and we're collecting data on how dense the grass is. That is, how many blades of grass do we have in every square area. So sometimes I take volunteers out and they throw these little what we call quadrats. They're just these little square PVC pipe things, and they throw them out, and then I have the volunteers counting how many plants they see in each square, and that's how I understand the density of the eelgrass bed, how thick the grass is. So that's what we're doing right now, is we're just tracking density and mapping the eelgrass too. We use GPS units that we can like press a button, and we can get a coordinate like a latitude and longitude, and we know exactly where the edge of that eelgrass area is, and we can map it. And so then we know whether the eelgrass areas are shrinking or growing, like that. So that's the kind of work I do in the ocean. Do you have any questions for me?
Yes. One was, if an animal eats off a top of eelgrass, will it regrow?
That's a really good question. Yes, it won't grow from the tip back out, right? Because it's not like grass that you mow in your yard. It's actually different from that kind of grass, even though it looks sort of similar. But so the eelgrass has what's called a little meristem. It's a little area at the bottom that can actually keep some new cells growing and kind of push the plant back up from the bottom. So it doesn't grow from the top up, it grows from the bottom up. And the roots aren't really roots. They're called rhizomes. They're like underground stems, and new plants can pop up off those underground stems. And so you can get new plants coming off of the original plant. And that's one way that the plants can spread in the ocean. And that's called asexual reproduction. But there's another way they can reproduce too, and that's through flowering. Seagrasses are the only kind of plant in the ocean that produces real flowers. Mm-hmm. And then the flowers make pollen that can float out in the ocean, and it can fertilize other flowers. And then you can actually collect eelgrass seeds and plant those. Some people have a lot more luck with planting seeds to get eelgrass to regrow, especially down like in the Chesapeake Bay area, down around Maryland. Those people down there have been doing a lot with eelgrass restoration, and they do it mostly by collecting seeds, but I haven't had so much luck with seeds. Do you have other questions?
What does eelgrass feel like?
Oh, you mean to touch?
Yeah.
Well, it depends sort of on the time of year. So I would say early in the year, the eelgrass feels like very flexible plastic, maybe, very thin, and it's not like grass out in the yard because it doesn't have a waxy kind of a layer to protect it. It doesn't really need that because it won't dry out. It doesn't need any coating to dry out, right? So it feels like thinner and not as rough as grass. But then as the summer wears on, lots of things like to stick to eelgrass, like little bits of algae, and it creates a slime layer on the grass. And so the grass can feel slimy later in the summer. And that's why the little periwinkles and the other snails like it so much, because they like to eat the slime. Maybe someday you'll get to feel it for yourself.
How long have you been studying eelgrass?
Well, it has a little story. Like I said, I didn't used to study marine grasses or marine ecosystems. So quite a few years ago, I used to be a high school biology teacher. And I did that for 9 years. I really wanted to help students experience science the way I did when I was a graduate student and a postdoc, and I was doing research. So, so when I was at the high school, I got an invitation by people at the Frenchman Bay Conservancy that's across the bay, and that's a nonprofit organization that does a lot of protection of land that's near here and around the ocean. And so they wanted to know if we wanted to help them monitor the water quality in the ocean. And we did. My students and I helped look at how salty the water was and how much oxygen was in the water and how much bacteria might be contaminating the water at some beaches and stuff like that. And I did that with my students for years and years and years, and looking at the water quality and understanding more about where there were some water quality problems we needed to clean up, and learning about other areas that were just so healthy. And at some point, my students decided that they wanted to start their own nonprofit organization. And we did in my classroom, and we called it the MDI Water Quality Coalition. And we worked with kids all over the island to stencil storm drains, dump waste drains to bay. I don't know if you've seen any stencils in front of storm drains. And we took students and teachers out doing marine debris cleanups and all kinds of things like that. And one day I got to thinking, like, am I doing the most important work? Are we asking the right questions and doing what needs done the most? So my students and I went on a journey. We called ourselves the ambassadors of the bay, and we went on a 4-day kayak journey. It was really exciting. And everywhere we went, we stopped and met people and talked to people on the shore, at Hadley Point, over at Lemoyne State Park, over at Hancock Point. We went out to Schoodic Peninsula and went to Schoodic Institute. We kayaked all the way back to Stave Island, and we met people from Maine Coast Heritage Trust there who were working on the island. And then we went all the way back to College of the Atlantic. It took us 4 days. And everywhere we went, I was talking to people about their concerns about the ocean. And people kept saying to me, well, my real concern is the eelgrass. And I said, I don't know what you're talking about. And they said, well, we've known the eelgrass is missing, that it's been declining and disappearing in some places. So this was 2007, 2006, 2007. So that's, 13 years ago. That's when I first heard about eelgrass. I mean, most people never think about it because unless you go out at a really, really, really low tide, you can't even see it. It's under the water. And most people don't know it's out there dealing with carbon, providing habitat for lobsters and baby fish and slime layers for our, little snails, and doing all the good work it does. So anyhow, I said, well, if it's missing, maybe we can replant it. And we started a conversation here, in Bar Harbor and over in Lemoyne. We were talking with people from the Lemoyne Conservation Commission and Frenchman Bay Conservancy and other people. And we just decided to, figure out how to get the grass replanted here. And we worked on it for like 10 years. And right in the middle of the 10 years, guess what happened?
What?
Well, we had a very warm year in 2012. It was one of the warmest years ever in the Gulf of Maine. And the green crabs just blew up. in population numbers. I mean, there were so many green crabs, more than anyone remembered. And that's when our problems started. The green crabs started to mess with the eelgrass. They started eating the clams. So I had a whole new problem on my hands. How to protect eelgrass from crabs. Also, I just didn't understand enough about crabs. So that's when I started studying crabs. And I got students from all grade levels and other people, again, helping me out, because you can't do anything by yourself. You need lots of people to help and lots of other organizations to join in. So we started doing crab surveys. So if you do want to do a crab survey sometime, let me know, because we have a method for you to use, a standard method, that if you use that same method, then we can compare your data to other student data and add it all together and make a bigger data set that tells a bigger story. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We have the recipe, in other words, for how you should, be counting crabs in a standard way. So the thing is that crabs kind of, petered out a little bit. I mean, there's still a lot of green crabs, but not as many as there used to be. But if I didn't keep counting, I wouldn't know, would I?
Yeah.
Yeah. Some people are trying to think of ways to get rid of green crabs. What do you think are some ways to get rid of green crabs?
Put a bunch of lobster traps out and catch them.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Lobster traps aren't the best kind of trap, but they work. There's some better traps that are specifically made for crabs. They're just called crab traps. And we've been using some of those. And then what we did was, when we caught them, we would just put them in the freezer. I had a giant freezer at the lab, and I could just put buckets of them in the freezer to just, so they would have a peaceful end, just quietly go to sleep in the cold. And then we would make compost. We put them in compost that people could use on their gardens. So then they weren't a waste. Yeah. So some people have been trying to trap them, to get rid of them, but some people aren't so interested in trapping them. It seems like a lot of work. So other people are thinking, well, maybe we need an incentive to trap them. Like maybe if people would be interested in eating them like lobsters, then maybe there'd be a market for them and more people would catch them and get them out of the ocean. But people haven't found a good way to cook them yet. There's people at the University of Maine who are who study nutrition science and food science, and they've been trying to come up with some ways to make those green crabs yummy, but they're not so yummy. Some people say that you can take the brand new crabs that have molted, and then you can just fry them, dip them in batter and fry them and eat them whole. Do you think you would like to eat a whole soft shell crab? Maybe not. Well, I'll probably have another meeting in a few minutes, but I can answer, a couple more questions if you have some.
So eelgrass absorbs CO2?
It does, because it has this process called photosynthesis, where it needs CO2 plus sunlight to make sugar energy. That's how plants grow. They need to make sugar energy, right? And so that's why when you eat like potatoes or carrots or anything that's part of a plant that absorbed, CO2 and sunlight, that it has a little sweetness. Apples have a little sweetness, carrots have a little sweetness, because they're making sugars. Interesting, right? Okay, so I will sign off for now, because we had a good session and we asked a lot of good questions. You learned something about eelgrass, and we'll think about our topic for next time, okay?